Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives.
Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. SCHEIN. Like usual, it's been a very busy week. ICE in the spotlight. Paid agitators and whack jobs continue to keep the focus on ICE cleanup operations in Minneapolis. Frankly, I think the key factor is that the scumball politicians in Minnesota are doing this on purpose to take some of the focus off the massive scandals that have been uncovered there. The idea here behind the ICE raids is to remove criminals who have committed rape, murder, and robbery. Why would any community refuse to turn them over to the feds? Further, why would any society release them into their own neighborhoods? Think about it, folks. So predictably, another American has been shot dead in the protests. This is sad and shocking. Just as Renee Good shooting was avoidable, the shooting of Alex Preddy was avoidable. I will not comment on possible liability of the agents involved in the shootings. That is up to the justice system. The first shooting seems to have more justification than the second, but there is plenty of controversy to go around. Note that Preddy is being presented by some as the second coming, an ICU nurse at the VA hospital. However, a week before his death, he engaged in a violent ICE protest where he kicked out the taillight of an ICE vehicle and somehow sustained a broken rib that day. So a week later, he appears at another ICE protest with an automatic handgun with 2 extra mags. This is serious firepower. Look, anyone who engages with law enforcement while carrying a weapon is asking for trouble. It does not matter if this is ICE or the police. This controversy seems to center on whether he pulled or displayed the handgun and if he was completely disarmed before he was shot. The band of commie losers disguised as Dems are screaming to ban ICE from the field, impeach Kristi Noem, and prosecute anyone they can think of. You know what? None of that is going to happen. Parallel to this is passing budgets that will run until the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. The Dems, having lost their stupid record government shutdown in 2025, did make deals, but covered Homeland Security funding for only 2 weeks. The Dems and some GOP are calling for ICE reforms. I may surprise some of my regular audience by saying I like some of what is proposed. Nobody given a gun by the government should be any less than fully trained. There are allegations that some ICE officers were rushed into the field with inadequate training. If true, let's fix that. 2, no law enforcement official should be wearing a face mask. This is America, and we don't do things that way. So, you know what? I would agree to that. My compromise is that if some clown goes to the home of an ICE agent, that will be a criminal invasion of privacy. Let's say 30 days in jail and a $1,000 fine, and then second offense, 6 months in jail and a $10,000 fine. Every city and state capital needs to acknowledge that no jurisdiction in the United States can be a sanctuary jurisdiction. That violates federal law. Simple, all federal funds for any purpose will be suspended due to such foolishness. 4, we need Congress to do its job for a change and implement comprehensive immigration reform on a bipartisan basis. We do need the bodies in this country. Figure out how to make it work while arresting the convicted criminals and either executing them or deporting them who are less dangerous. 5. In turn, federal judges that refuse to follow law need to be impeached immediately for blocking ICE enforcement and arrest activities. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Speaking of failed federal judges, the injustice system in America. I was outraged this week when U.S. District Judge Margaret Garnett ruled that the death penalty is off the table for a federal prosecution of accused killer Luigi Mangione for the public execution of healthcare executive Brian Thompson. Naturally, Mangione is presumed innocent until proven guilty, but the evidence against him seems to be overwhelming. This was alleged to have been a stalking resulting in a murder, but then the worst he could get, if convicted, is life in prison without parole. I note that the Menendez brothers in California were recently classified from that no parole status and are working on getting parole. So that verdict does not mean much to me these days. Further, why should the taxpayers pay for as much as 50 years or more of room and board when this appears to be such a heinous act? Does anyone believe that such a person, if convicted, should ever be allowed to the general population? I encourage Americans to think about the victims, not the killers. In this case, you have a wife and 2 children who will never have the love and support of their father. For what? Best I can tell, an evil political stunt. Speaking of injustice, a guy in Houston, Texas area was the first Texas execution this year. You might say, hey, Dr. Dave, you got what you want. Nope, this fellow killed his ex-girlfriend and her subsequent boyfriend in 1998. Yes, that means he was alive for nearly 28 years longer than the 2 young adults he murdered. This is not justice. I want to see capital punishment reform in this country. I want to see persons convicted of such crimes put to death in less than 18 months. Time to get justice for the victims. No more endless appeals. Did the victims get 28 years to plead for their lives? I notice in all this extreme leftist talk about ICE, none of them mention the many innocent Americans killed, raped, and robbed by the evildoers. If it's time for America to focus on real victims, not the fake martyrs promoted by the left. New Fed Reserve Chair is pending. Most Americans have no idea what the Fed does and why they should care. The bottom line is that this little understood operation has an impact on the day-to-day lives of most Americans. The Fed is supposedly non-political. If you believe that, I have a bridge in New York that I'd like to sell you. The term of Fed Chair Jerome Powell is up in a few months. After much speculation, Trump has nominated Kevin Warsh to succeed Powell. What little is known about him is that in 2006, he was appointed to the Fed board. At that time, he was the youngest person ever to be on the Fed board. Presently not on the board, he has been a visible critic of the current board actions. No, his arrival will not cause mortgage rates to drop immediately, or suddenly that formerly $4 item that is now $6 will not drop back to $4. Too bad about that. What we have seen is that Powell was slow to move when inflation was surging, and now, according to Trump, he has not lowered the Fed rate fast enough to accommodate a growing economy. Mortgage rates are tied to many factors, not just the Fed rate. So what we need to do is be aware of the fact that the Fed rate has some impact on mortgages, but it's not going to be the big change that people are hoping for. Daily impact from the Fed is there, but may be hard to appreciate. The dollar is very low relative to other national currencies. This means that if you travel overseas, your dollar will buy less. That may not impact too many people, but suppose you buy one of the tens of thousands of items like car, computer, or TV that are made overseas or have foreign parts. Each component will take more American dollars to purchase due to the weaker dollar. Further, a Fed viewed as weak may cause uncertainty in the market. So gold and silver are at unrealistic record levels right now. Buying these metals is viewed as a search for stability. So keep your fingers crossed that things will get better with a new chair, but don't hold your breath at the same time. Business is not rosy in all quarters. Saks Global Enterprises, that also includes the famous brands Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman, has announced that most Saks office outlets will be closing as part of a recent bankruptcy filing. About 50 stores will close, with about a dozen left spread across 6 states. With my crew, the only Saks we have stopped at is the office stores, since we cannot afford the fancy department stores. This will impact a lot of middle-class Americans looking for some nice items for their wardrobe. Reports are that the $2.7 billion Neiman Marcus acquisition helped to push Saks into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That is known as a reorganization, and often businesses reduce the size of their operation to attract new financing to emerge from Chapter 11. Communist New York City tries to ban Newsmax and taxis. Since I usually use a rideshare service, I rarely take taxis. Apparently, New York City taxis have TV screens and carry Newsmax. Not sure if they carry other networks. In any event, a buddy of the current commie mayor of New York City, Manhattan Borough President Brad Hoylman-Siegel, is trying to block Newsmax on the city's 9,000 taxis. He apparently has never heard of the First Amendment. Fortunately, there have been strong pushback against his stupid proposal. Not all reorganizations are tied to bankruptcy. In fact, Kroger, which is pretty healthy, even though the Albertsons merger did not go through, is making some big moves. They are closing 60 underperforming stores. At the same time, they'll be opening 14 new stores, which will likely be the big marketplace Krogers, like the couple that I patronize personally here in Houston. In a bit of a surprise, given Kroger's strong presence in the Houston market, a major marketplace store in a high-end part of Houston is now closed. I did not realize that Kroger did not have a retail presence in rapidly growing Florida. They have been providing on-demand services with robot warehouses. That is now being shut down, so Kroger will not have a presence in Florida. I assume this is due to entrenched competition already present in that big market. The real Chinese threat to the Panama Canal. I want to credit Virginia Allen of the Daily Signal for a fascinating and important article on the Chinese threat to the Panama Canal. Miss Allen's piece credited Hot Zone podcaster, former military member, and someone who actually lives in Panama, Chuck Holton, for his critical evaluation of the threat. Recently, there's been a lot of publicity about China locating operations at each end of the Panama Canal, and this is how it presents a direct threat to American security. Remember that failed President Carter gave the canal away during his administration. However, just controlling the software that runs the canal could have far more devastating results. I think this is an important issue for U.S. throughout the world. I was alerted to this mega threat a few years ago when I learned that many of the cranes that operate in major ports throughout the U.S. came from China. That includes the computerized operating systems. So China could shut down our ports. As part of our Saving America series, I called on the appropriate powers to make sure these systems are converted to U.S. secure systems. Allen's article notes that on average, 36 to 38 ships traverse the canal each day, including U.S. Navy ships. Of the civilian ships, most are bound for U.S. ports, but not all are U.S. flagged vessels. A shutdown of the canal would have a major impact on U.S. shipping, including, importantly, the U.S. Navy. Panama ends China Canal port deal. In something that I thought had already been resolved, the Supreme Court of Panama just held that the contract with Hutchinson Port Holdings of Hong Kong to operate 2 ports along the Panama Canal was unconstitutional. Regardless of how this was obtained, it was critical that the CCP be blocked from this hemisphere. Hopefully, this will spread through the rest of the world where the CCP is trying to buy influence through its crooked business deals. Nurse fired for promoting dangerous conduct. We associate nurses with healing the sick. Most Americans have more contact with nurses than doctors. However, that is not a universal situation. In a horrendous story, a nurse, Melinda Cook, posted to her social media that other nurses should deliberately date ICE agents and then drug them with poison and spray them with other substances. She worked for a VCU health facility in Richmond, Virginia. On the positive side, it took less than 2 days for VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, to fire her. Good for them. It does appear that the ICE derangement syndrome may be more toxic than the Trump derangement syndrome. Wild elephant rampages in India. In a story that's almost unimaginable in 2026, a wild male elephant in eastern India went on a 10-day rampage. I'm not sure why the rampage was not stopped at an earlier point. Reports are that 24 people were killed and 15 more were injured. I was curious about what was done to stop the elephant. Killing the elephant was apparently not an option. Last report was that the authorities still had not tranquilized it. Incredibly, as many as 500 people are killed by elephants in India each year. The expansion of human settlements into previously forested areas is one cause of this serious problem. I find this personally surprising after seeing many elephants in the wild on safaris in Africa several years ago. I observed a very purposeful, matriarchal society. They are great moms. The teenage males, on the other hand, are tossed out of the herd to go live on their own in a little bachelor group. And hopefully they'll get that situation resolved. And while I'm a big fan of elephants, certainly it's the symbol of the Republican Party, I also do not understand why, if you have an animal that is causing so much hurt and injury to humans, that it would not be put out of its misery.
All rise.
Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I am sure that you will agree that she deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Dr. Ronika Jacobs, who is also known as Dr. Rowe. She's an educator and life coach. She holds a doctorate and master's degree from Concordia University in Texas and a bachelor's degree from Prairie View A&M University, which is not far from our base here in Houston. Her company, Strive Leadership Consulting, LLC, provides training for personal and career development. She also hosts 2 podcasts, Strive for More, Lifestyle Podcast, and Life Jacked, the Resilience Podcast. Her passion is to uplift women and to make sure they understand every aspect of their beauty inside and out, whether she's helping women build resilience, gain self-awareness, or learn how to become more mindful to reduce stress. She supports her clients from start to finish. She offers one-on-one coaching or group sessions online. She lives nearby in Houston, Texas, with her 3 sons and is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We welcome Dr. Ronika Jacobs, Dr. Rowe, for her first appearance on Saving America.
Oh, Dr. SCHEIN, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Hello to your viewers out there and the listeners. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here on your show.
And we're delighted to have you with us. As you know, we ask our guests 3 questions that will help our audience know more about you. And first, you've focused your career on teaching and coaching resilience. What happened in your own background to drive you to research this important subject?
You know, the interesting thing about humans is that the number one thing that you cannot control is human behavior. You cannot. All right. We all get to decide what we want to do. We have free will. And, anytime someone has something for us to do, we actually have a decision whether we want to do it or not. And so what I've learned in education as I was teaching children, and some children are, they're ready to go and they have no problem going along with what you tell them to do and they are compliant. And then you have some children sometimes that are not. And I would always wonder, like, okay, well, what makes this particular student tick? Like, okay, what can I do to get them to do whatever I'm asking them to do? And so I started finding ways, and really it's all about classroom management. And then I thought about my own personal life, and I would go through these different, trials and mishaps and life jacked moments, as I like to call them. But I would always pop out on the other side. Now, of course, I'm a person of faith. And so I know that, God is the head of my life. And I seek, counsel through him at all times. However, and I have an incredible amount of faith, but faith without works is dead. So I recognize, like, why is it that I can bounce back and, and be resilient and I can just push through, even though I get down. And sometimes people think, well, you don't go through things like I do. And I was like, yes, I do. Like, what would make you think that? Like, I go through all kinds of stuff. And so I just started thinking about that. So when I got in my doctoral program, I started, and then also going into leadership in the education world and coaching other teachers and trying to figure out, okay, well, what makes them listen to me and want to change? And so I started studying like transformational leadership and what can you do to inspire people to make a change, because really it's a change in habits, it's a change in behavior. So what can I do, or what are some strategies that you can do to influence people or persuade them, to get them to do the things that you're wanting them to do, or to get them to see or make a paradigm shift or see a different perspective?
Well, it's really fascinating to just go through this whole area. How does
Yeah.
resilience help a person to get through life? Why do we need it?
I think we need it so that we can wake up the next day, right? Because, of course, days are going to pass. The sun is going to rise, it's going to set. The moon is going to rise, the moon is going to set. But I think we need the resilience within us because it gives us strength. It gives us the strength to push through. It gives us the strength to take those moments that are less than favorable and or the things that we don't plan to go through, and some of them are minor inconveniences and then others are extremely catastrophic and they're life changing. But I feel like we need resilience because it helps us to push through and, like I said, and to wake up the next day because, as they say, life be lifing, of course, and you can't control it, right? You cannot control it. So if you have to understand your locus of control, which is the things that you can control and the things that you can't control. And so you work on managing the things that you can control. But I think each time you go through these life jacked moments, you become stronger. And I think that you have to go through some things, right, in order to build resilience and to become stronger. Because if you don't go through anything and you don't have any challenges, you don't grow.
I believe there's an old cliche, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger.
Yes, yes, that's absolutely true. Although it does feel like, but this is really killing me right now. But as they say, after you get through it, there's a joke that said, "But did you die though?" And you
Yeah,
didn't,
absolutely.
luckily.
Absolutely. So, can anyone learn to be more resilient, or does it take a certain mindset just to get to a period where, somebody's really resilient?
I do believe that some people are innately more resilient than others, but I do think it has to do with their mindset. I do believe that you can build resilience. It's a muscle, just like, you go to the gym to build up your muscles, to be healthier, to be able to be more agile and move around. The same thing, you gain more knowledge to become smarter, to do more things that require cognitive abilities. But the same thing comes with resilience. Like I said, you have to go through stuff, and that's the testing ground. And that's where you build your resilience is going through these different challenges. Now, some of us go through more challenges than others. And so also with that, we have to recognize, are these challenges that we're going through, are they self-induced? So you do have to do a lot of introspection, which is really hard sometimes, is to admit that I might be the source. I might be the nucleus of what is going on and why I keep having all these life jacked moments. But you have to understand to that you have to have that mindset to be open to build different habits, right? And to kind of do life differently. And so I do think that there are some steps that you can take. There's some readings that you can have. You can hire a resilience coach to be by your side that can help you, kind of change your habits and look at life differently, change your paradigm and build resilience. So that way, if you do have a life jacked moment, whether it's you, your children, your spouse, your significant other, family members, that you're able to handle them a little bit better. Because once we are life jacked, right, initially, depending on what the crisis is, we, our amygdala fires, right? And we are fearful. And it's either you're going to fight, you're going to flight, or you're going to freeze, right? And so, and then at that time, you're in your reptilian brain, as they call it, right? And so a lot of times you make these decisions and they're just band-aids. They're just band-aids and they're not really not solving the problem. But when you use certain strategies and you have the right mindset with resilience, then you start recognizing that you can make decisions that aren't band-aids. They actually are, real life surgery, as someone may say, like you're really being a surgeon and you're really piecing your life back together to fix it, to get past whatever the tragedy is. And I mean anything. I have so many guests who have gone through all kinds of things, but they're still here and they're still pushing forward and they're able to tell their stories of, hey, I was way down here and I have risen up to here. And it's fantastic. And it can happen to anyone. But you have to believe that you are going to get on the other side.
Well, now quickly, you had mentioned the word life jack several times, and
Yeah.
just for our audience, how do you define the term life jacked?
Yeah, sure. So if you think about you've probably heard the term carjacked or hijacked, right? It's
Yes.
when someone takes something that doesn't, belong to them and they take it from you, right? So you hijack a plane, like they're taking the plane, or they hijack your car, you're being carjacked, they're taking the car from you. So life jacked is when things that are unexpected, unplanned, those moments that happen, and they pretty much like hijack your life, right? They kind of, then you're going along in one path, and then you recognize like, oh my gosh, this thing happens, and you're like, what the hell? Or excuse me, but I mean, so sometimes you're like, what in the world happened? Like, and sometimes, like I said, they're minor inconveniences. Some of them are just minor, and you're just like, oh, this is annoying, but I can push through and I can figure it out. And then other times it's like, I didn't ask for this. Why me? Why is this happening to me? Right? And it's easy to stay there in that why me moment and be a victim, or you could decide to be a victor and you can push forward. You can gather your resources together, build your community, and push forward. Because again, remember what I said, the sun is going to rise and set every single day. You just have to decide if you want to be in that sunrise and sunset each and every day.
And it sounds a lot when you're saying that. I'm thinking about parents dealing with children, and I've got two generations. I've got kids and grandkids, and when there are a lot of bumps along the road, and a lot of times they're not very serious, and we know that as parents and grandparents, but the child experiencing it, it's their first time, their first love breaks up with them and things like that, or they don't get picked for the football team or the softball team, and they're just devastated, or they don't get into their favorite college. And yet, when we're looking at it from the other side, we're saying, this is the smallest bump you'll ever get.
Yes. Yes. That
So
is very true.
it's just a fascinating situation. And how can our audience get more information about you and your important work?
Oh, absolutely. So you can find me on pretty much all social media platforms. I'm not on X, or formerly Twitter. I've been backing away from there. But if you just look up Life Jacked Podcast on Instagram, on Facebook, I think Life Jacked, the Resilience Podcast on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can either look me up, Dr. Ronika Jacobs, or you can look up Life Jacked, the Resilience Podcast. You can also send me an email if you are interested in being a guest at lifejacked, that's LIFEJACKED, one word, at email.com. And you can contact me there. I also have a newsletter. If you go to my website, the website is www.ronicalljacobs.com. That's RONICALJACOBS.com. There's a lot of resources there. You can sign up for a resilience coaching session. And you can also, like I said, get to my newsletter. I have a newsletter called Strength on Sundays, and it releases every Sunday. And it's I share just different stories about my own particular life, and I give you 3 action steps to try. This past week, I talked about physical resilience and building physical resilience. I think the week before that, I talked about financial resilience. So there's always something related to resilience in different aspects of our life. And so I hope you sign up, and I hope to see that my email list keeps growing so I can share these strategies and tips and we can all get stronger.
Please proceed.
As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we're in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. A disease known as political correctness has swept through America. It has especially damaged education at all levels. The case of Christian McGee is a great example. He received a 3-day suspension for using the phrase illegal alien in asking his teacher a question at Central Davidson High School in Lexington, North Carolina. His family has helped him file a lawsuit in federal court accusing the school of violating his First Amendment rights. Christian's mother explained that this could have him viewed as a racist and might impede his chances for college. The school would not comment directly, but explained that this apparently involved their code of conduct. So the student handbook states, schools may place restrictions on a student's right to free speech when the speech is obscene, abusive, promoting illegal drug use, or is reasonably expected to cause a substantial disruption to the school day. And this is a quote according to the Carolina Journal. Now, how would using a correct term like illegal alien in any way violate the above code? That's beyond me, folks. But then again, I only have 4 earned academic degrees. What would I know relative to the geniuses running this high school? It is even more interesting in that this case is in North Carolina. I would be less surprised if it was in communist-occupied California or New York. Therefore, Saving America awards Christian McGee and his family a coveted Saving America A grade. Christian, I assume through his family, filed suit to clear his name. A year later, the Davidson County School District settled with the teen and provided $20,000 in compensation. A footnote is that the money will help pay for Christian to attend a new private school.
Sustained.
Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. Folks, it is said that there's one born every minute, referring to persons who've been taken advantage of by various fraudulent schemes. A couple in Louisiana, the Joaquims, in 2005, came up with the classic 105 medical reimbursement program. The idea was that this program would pay participants money when their health insurance did not cover certain expenses. In 2012, Barino was hired as the head of marketing for this questionable program. The program charged $1,000 a month for individual and $1,600 a month for family, and was marketed as an employee benefit plan. Due to the high cost, the program had a second part where it was supposedly supported by a complex banking and life insurance arrangement. That part was bogus. Barino apparently was a good marketer, and the plan ended up with over 350 employers and 4,400 employees who were defrauded into enrolling and paying fees for the classic 105 program. The scheme fell apart by 2018, and the Joaquims were ordered to pay $23 million in restitution. Then the next case, United States versus Barino. He was charged with wire fraud in this scheme in 2019 in federal district court. He fairly quickly agreed to a plea deal with spending 1 year and 1 day in jail. However, he was then hit with a restitution order of $25 million. The finding was that he was equally as guilty as the Joaquims. The restitution order was then presented to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. He challenged the restitution order on various grounds. The appeals court, however, was not buying his arguments. It ruled that he was guilty of the crime of fraud or deceit. It also held that these large damages were established by the victims, and that Barino's continuous concealment of the fraud directly and proximately caused the victims' losses. The court concluded that the district court did not err in ordering restitution, although it did adjust the amount to $21 million. This serves as a cautionary tale that if you're cooperating in a fraudulent scheme put together by someone else, you may still be found fully responsible.
Please raise your right hand.
Following the crash in cruise activity in 2020 due to COVID, things were tough for the cruise industry. However, this popular vacation option has surged back since then. AAA estimates that 21.7 million Americans will hit the waters in 2026, making a consistent jump in travel over the last 4 or 5 years. Two well-known lines include Royal Caribbean and Norwegian Cruise Lines. From my base in Houston, just 50 miles south in Galveston, sailing with the big cruise ships has become a boon to the economy there. Bigger ships with more perks seems to be coming out every year. Such ships are great for families. They provide activities for all different age groups and are generally affordable. The convenience of unpacking once and visiting multiple locations, hey, that's kind of hard to beat. Suppose, however, you want a really nice, intimate experience with other adults. The attractive alternative approach is called a riverboat. There are a handful of global riverboat lines with fascinating trips around the world. In contrast to the large cruise ships, the riverboats may have from less than 100 to about 200 passengers. In the USA, Viking River Cruises does the most advertising. Therefore, it may be the most familiar to Americans interested in such an experience. Other major global riverboat operators are AMA Waterways, Uniworld, Talk, and SCHEIN. Parallel to the big cruise lines, the outlook for the riverboat operators for 2026 is also very positive. My first riverboat experience was about a decade ago on AMA Waterways with a cruise from Prague to Budapest. We flew to the launch city and spent a few days before boarding. The trip then featured day tours at beautiful cities along the Danube River before disembarkation in Budapest. We spent a few days there before returning home. During our travels, we were wined and dined with great food and many beverage alternatives. Evenings often featured previews of the next stop and sometimes local live entertainment. Since then, I've had the opportunity to try about a half dozen small ship experiences, but I still hold AMA in special regard. I was booked on an AMA cruise in Southeast Asia when COVID hit. That tour was canceled, of course. The itinerary included Myanmar, and due to the military takeover there, that trip was not rescheduled. This December marked my return to AMA with special tour from Cartagena to Barranquilla, Colombia. The AMA Magdalena is one of 260 passenger ships on this new route, which has been in effect for about 8 months. The one-week tour features stops along the Magdalena River with local guides sharing the history and culture of the various villages. The largest intermediate stop was the city of Mompox, located at a major branch in the river. As a history buff, learning the stories behind the villages was enriching. Our first short tour was to the village of Palenque. A little told story is that the Spanish took kidnapped Africans to help develop the port of Cartagena. One of the slaves was a chief, Bencos Biojo. He somehow managed to escape with 10 others and set up in a remote area. Dating from 1603, that is the town now called Palenque, which means walled city. It became a refuge for escaped and freed slaves. After a century of fighting with the Spanish forces, finally a truce was reached with the King of Spain in 1714. Later the same day, we toured the historic town of Calamar. It was an important transportation point, but the steamship stopped calling and it has declined. With the recent arrival of the AMA riverboats, things are looking up for that town as well. Further into our journey, we visited the village of Santa Barbara de Pinto. A special event was held for Christmas. AMA Waterways provided a wrap present for each child. The ship's guests were invited to help distribute the presents on Christmas Eve in the town's meeting center. Over 200 children received presents during the event. As with other riverboat experiences, the cabins are beautiful and well appointed. Comfort is the name of the game. Great food and beverages will please every palate. There are always multiple choices for each meal. In my experience, there are generally 3 types of cabins at various price points on these riverboats. Obviously, that can vary by cruise line in the specific ships. What was especially appealing to me was the entire riverboat crew was from the country of Colombia. The food served were purchased locally along the route. We were able to experience the vast variety of fruits available in Colombia. The villages and cities benefited from this positive tourism. The views along the river were, of course, stunning. AMA Waterways was founded in 2002 by Rudy Schreiner, Christian Karst, and Jimmy Murphy. This family business is based in California. The line offers a variety of cruises around the world. And I'm recording this from my cabin on the AMA Magdalena on my last day here.
Objection, Your Honor.
Quick preview. Maybe America is not broke. A colleague of mine sent me a link to a new article, America's Hidden Strategic Reserve. Jim Rickards reveals forgotten $150 trillion asset tied to post-Civil War legal code. This fascinating article references a report by ex-CIA advisor Jim Rickards titled The American Birthright. The article claims that the recent elimination of the Chevron doctrine, which we've talked about on our Business Law 101 series, is a court-created fraud that should certainly not have been around for 40 years, and it may allow America to now claim $100 trillion in reserve of natural wealth buried beneath federal land, wealth that has been inaccessible due to historical legal protections and government regulations. My staff is contacting Rickards about doing an interview in the future to discuss his work in more detail here on Saving America.
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
Our series Interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure that you will agree that he deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Dr. Stephen Bryan, who is a leading expert in security strategy and technology. He's held senior positions in the Department of Defense, on Capitol Hill as the president of a large multinational defense and technology company. Dr. Stephen Bryan has 50 years of experience in government and industry. Senior fellow of the Center for Security Policy. He served as senior staff director for the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, as head of the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Trade Security Policy, as the founder and first director of the Defense Technology Security Administration, and as president of FinAmerica North America, and as a commissioner of the U.S.-China Security Review Commission. Bryan writes for Asia Times, American Thinker, Epoch Times, Washington Times, the Jewish Policy Center, and many other newspapers and magazines, too numerous to mention. He has published 6 books on technology and security subjects, including Technology Security and National Power and Security for Holy Places. He's contributed to a number of studies on national security and defense, holds a PhD in International Affairs from Tulane, a postdoc from Virginia Tech, an MA in International Politics from Tulane, and his bachelor's degree from Rutgers in Political Science. And folks, we had to shorten this so we'd have time for the interview. We welcome Dr. Stephen Bryan for his first appearance on Saving America.
Well, thank you for having me. I made it long enough to create a filibuster, use up time.
Well, we're still going to give you the full time for your answers, because as we talked about pre-interview, very, very interested in the subject that you deal with. And as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. How would you evaluate the readiness of the United States to win the second Cold War?
Right now, not too good. I think we have some real deficits, some problems. The biggest one, aside from the types of equipment that we have, is the availability of equipment. We don't have enough. Our stockpiles are way down. We didn't expect the Ukraine war to suck out as much hardware and equipment as it has, and it's taken an awful lot. And we weren't prepared for that. And if we're going to be credible and we're going to be able to deal with a rising Russia and a rising China, which I think are the 2 main challenges for us, then we have to be properly prepared, and we're not yet.
And would you say that Russia, which of course launched, I understand, 700 missiles at Ukraine over the last night, is moving in a little different direction than just tanks on the ground? Because I understand the land war in Ukraine using a lot of materials, but it doesn't seem to have made much good for either country.
Well, the Russians are gaining ground, so we have to be a little bit cautious about how we evaluate it. But the warfare process has changed a lot, mainly thanks to new weapons like drones, which have made it very difficult to use traditional armor on the battlefield, which is the formula that the Russians followed, the formula the Ukrainians followed, the formula that the United States followed. So everybody's now in a kind of a conundrum as to, how do we prepare against these new kinds of threats? And then there's the whole missile threat, which is, we saw that in Israel from Iran, the launch of Iranian missiles in large numbers. We've seen it in Ukraine with the Russians using Iskander and other types of missiles, some hypersonic. Um, and the air defenses just can't keep up. They're not really good enough. So we have a tremendous challenge in front of us in terms of how to do war fighting, but more than that, if we're properly prepared, how to deter a war, which I think is the most important thing of all.
Yeah, when I say winning the Cold War, that is, of course, how we won the first Cold War, through up to about 1990, was the fact that the Russians became convinced that we would beat them in a war. So that's
I
why I
think they were
refer to
right,
this.
by the way.
Yeah,
That was I had been working in the 80s in the Pentagon on precisely that question.
sure.
And we didn't have the volume of equipment that the Russians had then and still have, but we had very good equipment and we used computers and electronics much more than the Russians did. So it gave us a qualitative advantage that nowadays has sort of disappeared.
I understand. And what's the current risk to the United States from China and Russia with regard to outer space? That's a big concern of mine, and I don't hear enough discussion about it in
Yeah,
public.
yeah, there's not very much, and yet it's quite critical because if President Trump is right, and I think he is, that we need a space-based air defense capability to go after Russian or Chinese missiles to protect the United States, then being able to protect those space platforms is critical. And, the Russians have anti-satellite capabilities, the Chinese have them, and we have them, but not as well developed and not in quantity. So I think the future will be preparing for some kind of space defense, let's call it that. That we'll have to be able to protect our satellite. I'm a big fan of Elon Musk's space link system, Starlink, it's called, because it uses thousands of satellites. He's projecting up to 47,000 satellites.
Wow.
That's terrific because what that means is if you want to find the one that's causing you trouble, good luck. And I think we have to take the same approach for uh, Golden Dome, which is what President Trump calls the forthcoming space-based defense system. It has to be on hundreds, if not thousands, of satellites so that it won't be possible to blow them out of space, which is what the Chinese are hoping to do and the Russians hope to do. But mostly the
I
Chinese, I
understand.
think they're the most significant risk today.
You're right. And people think I'm talking about, we both of us grew up with the Star Wars and
Yeah.
shows like that and movies like that and the wonderful imagination of Gene Hackenberry and so forth. But the reality is that the most effective defense might be an offense where we develop a satellite technology or space technology so that we can identify and take out as many of their satellites as possible.
Well, again, you have to have enough in orbit and in the right places to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's still
So,
the same challenge. And I think right now, uh, in the United States, the only guy who can do that in an effective way on a mass basis and also with recoverable rockets is SpaceX, and that's Elon Musk.
right. Well,
No one
I
else is
saw,
even near that.
the dispute between Musk and Trump that's in its sixth week now
Yeah.
is unfortunate. And one of the things that Trump said, and I'm certainly thinking that he said it in a just a fit of anger, is that well, we don't need SpaceX and Musk can go broke, but I get concerned because remember that our trusty major manufacturer, Boeing, sent two astronauts up there and they didn't trust the satellite enough to take them back. And SpaceX brought them back, not Boeing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing's interesting is that Ukraine today, the Ukrainian army, is utterly dependent on Musk's Starlink system for communications. Without that, they're out of business. So any threat to cut off SpaceX and cut off Musk is silly. It's just plain silly, and it's not real. I mean, I don't think Mr. Trump would do that. I don't think Musk would get that angry to cut it off because he could cut it off in a second. But it does illustrate how much this matters to our national security. It'd be nice if the Pentagon figured that out. They're still a little bit behind the curve, I'm afraid.
Well, it's a very serious issue. The United States cannot do everything that needs to be done to improve the security of the free world. What would you suggest as priorities? In other words, what do we need to do first, and what do we need to tell our allies?
Well, there are two things that we need to do. The first one is we need to improve the manufacturing of our weapon systems to a level where we can have enough to deal with the threat. Our output is way low, way low. And even with simple ammunition like a 155 millimeter shell, we can't produce them fast enough. And the new plants that we're trying to open in Texas seem to have fallen apart. So we got a problem there. We got an industrial problem. We have a workforce problem. We have a supplies problem. All that really needs a high level attention to be fixed. So that's the first thing is to get our manufacturing on track. And the second thing is to stop concentrating on more and more sophisticated equipment that takes too long to manufacture and is too expensive. Because, the budget for this year for defense is approaching $1 trillion. Now, if I had $1 trillion when I was in the Pentagon, I'd been in Fat City, but I wasn't, I didn't have that. We were worried about every nickel. But, today I think the cost of equipment is just staggering. I'll give you a couple examples. The cost of that Patriot missile that has been controversial in the last few days, should we send them to Ukraine or shouldn't we? They cost almost $4 million a piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of money.
Yes.
If you talk about the SM-3 2A, which is a ship-based, Aegis-based anti-aircraft and anti-ballistic missile interceptor, the top price there is $28.7 million a shot. I don't see how that's sustainable. I mean, it's just not, because the other guys can make a lot of missiles cheaply. So we've got to come up with some solutions that aren't so expensive. And I think the thing that really worries me is the Defense Department, bless its heart, never worries about the price of goods. That's not their department, but it is their department because you
Yes,
get
it
less
is.
and less for more and more money. And that's not a good thing today. So I think if I were Pete Hegseth and I had this responsibility at DOD, the first thing I would do is say, I want to see a 30 or 40% reduction in the cost of goods. And that's for starters. And challenge them to get pricing down and to get the cost out of these systems, because it's going to kill us if we don't get smart. And in Europe, it's even worse. Because in Europe, you have unions and expenses that go way beyond social credits and all this stuff that raises the price of goods beyond in the stratosphere. They can't afford it either. And while they pledged to go to 5% of GDP, I'll make you a little bet, never going to happen because they don't have the money. So it's really very important to find ways to reduce costs and to become more efficient if we're going to be able to have a credible defense.
Well, one thought I had on this was if we could reduce conventional armaments like the tanks that are, I saw one of your articles about the tanks and that they're not doing very well. Is it the Abrams tank? And the thing is that can we reduce our traditional arms and switch more of it to mass production of what's really needed today?
I think we could. I mean, look, I wrote about robotics and tanks, to try it. I mean, I think robotics are really important as a solution because it not only lowers the cost of the weapon itself, but it reduces the crew needs to be risking its life driving those things. So there are a lot of hidden costs in defense that you forget, because if someone is wounded or killed in a fight, I mean, you're going to pay for that for the next 20 years, right?
Yes.
So you need to take that into account. It's part of the price of a weapon system today. The attrition rates on tanks in Ukraine, the Abrams tanks, it's about 2/3 of what we sent there has been destroyed. That's not acceptable. It's not.
I had not heard that until I read your article on that.
Oh, that's
And
it.
because it makes it sound like the Russian tanks have taken a beating over there, but
They did.
I hadn't seen people mentioning what happened to the tanks we sent over there and our allies loaned to them.
Well, the same thing happened to the Leopard, the German tanks,
Yes.
and the British. They didn't send very many, but their Challenger tanks didn't do very well either. So because the nature of warfare has changed, that's what I've been trying to emphasize. And
Right.
and maybe the tank and traditional doctrine of how you use them doesn't work on the modern battlefield. You have to go to other things. And by the way, these tanks aren't cheap, not by a long shot. You know, they started at around 10 million, and the all up Abrams tank is about $25 million a copy. So you're talking about a lot of money. You know, we can't afford this sort of thing. And we're a rich country. But I think we can. And we have to figure out more cost-effective ways to protect our nation and to protect our allies.
Well, it sounds like some very important pieces. And Dr. Bryan, as you know, we promised the people that we interview that we're going to keep it short, but hopefully our audience is fascinating as I am about what you talk about. How can our audience get more information about you and your important work and your publications?
Well, I mean, I do write for Asia Times, so you can always go there. The other possibility, and I think it's the one I like most, is I have a Substack called Weapons and Strategy. And if you go to substack.com and look up Weapons and Strategy, you'll find it there. You can subscribe. It's free. And I contribute typically 2 articles a week, so I'm pretty productive.
Wow.
In my old age.
You certainly are, sir.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Speaking of Hollywood, Late Night with Stephen Colbert has been canceled, although interestingly, not until next May. In the Why Would I Care department, with the departure of Johnny Carson, Jay Leno, and even David Letterman, I stopped watching any of the late evening talk shows. The newer shows are just political trash pits with people I never heard of in most cases or did not like, including the host. Recently on Unscripted Politics, my co-host Kevin McDonald indicated he felt this was a political hit job. He referenced the Paramount settlement of $16 million with Trump as evidence. I disagree. A show that costs $120 million to produce annually and loses $40 million should have been canceled already. TV is a business. I assume it is not being pulled early or due to contractual commitments to Colbert. In my case, I watch the local news, and sometimes before I can change the channel, this windbag would inevitably start with something offensive to me. Hey, not a good start. Colbert might want to consider what he's doing. However, the whack left, led by Pocahontas herself, Liz Warren, claimed it was only due to politics. Of course, this is why America is in debt up to its butt due to moronic political leaders like her.
This session is adjourned.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. SCHEIN, and I will see you next week.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honored to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA-Global-TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.